But we need to bring those troops home. We do not need to any longer threaten the Iranians. I mean, they're not a model nation. But if we want to teach other people how to be a model nation, we should concentrate on improving ourselves and setting a good example so others would want to emulate us. You can't spread the much that is good about America through to the rest of the world through a barrel of gun, because it cancels out all the goodness of America. But getting out of the Middle East would be one thing. But don't you think it's time we came home from Japan? Time to come home from Korea? Time to come home from Europe? I mean, how much longer do we have to stay there? But at the rate we're going, it looks like it's going to be when the dollar is totally destroyed. And that is what's happening today. Every single day almost, when you look at the news, the dollar's down again. Inflation is very high, much higher than the government admits. And the concern of the American people is very, very great. But it's going to get a lot worse, because when the dollar goes down, inflation comes back, interest rates will be coming back up. And a lot of interest rates, even though the rates that the banks pay to borrow from the Federal Reserve happens to be low, the interest rates that you have to pay if you want to go buy a house today, those rates are going up. So that is what happens when you destroy a currency. The destruction of money is a very, very important issue. When a country does that, it transfers wealth from the middle class, destroys the middle class, and transfers the wealth to the Wall Street rich class. This is what has happened over these many, many decades, these last several decades. Countries that never had a free market economy and sound money, they don't even have middle classes. But what we're witnessing today is the elimination and the wiping out of the middle class. Something has to be reversed. And it has to do with spending. It has to do with monetary policy. It has to do with the foreign policy. It has to do with this idea of welfareism. This idea that we can take care of everybody by merely having more welfare poured on us, that won't work either. This idea that once they decided that the recession was coming, well, let's send everybody either $600 or $1,200 and the recession will be prevented. The politicians in Washington don't have any money. They can't tax much more. We've been taxed to the hilt. It's hard to borrow anymore. So what are they going to do? Print the money. What does that do? That causes the inflation. So this whole idea rejects the whole notion of what America is all about. And that is sound money, personal liberty, property rights, voluntary contracts, and self-reliance. People willing to go out and work for themselves and knowing they can keep what they earn. That's what we need. But our conditions right now will continue to go down unless we have this reversal. The magnificent thing of this past year has been that a lot of people have rallied to the cry of more liberty, less government. And I am utterly amazed. You know, a lot of people have said that I have removed your apathy. And I am pleased I have, but people like you have removed my skepticism, because before I got into the race, more than a year ago, I was very skeptical. I just believed that there wouldn't be very many people who cared, that the young people wouldn't respond. I didn't know how big the remnant, the true believers were. Because we never know how many people really believe and have been turned off and maybe not voting and not knowing there were a lot of allies out there. I think this last year has helped us discover that there are allies out there. There are a lot of people who are very interested and want to had many good crowds around the country, and I'm just really delighted with the nice turnout here. But I think what is so magnificent about the crowds that we have gotten is that when the people come together to hear the message of freedom and self-reliance, all of a sudden we bring different kinds of people together. People who look different, think different, they have different religion, they have different social values, and it's because in a truly free society, people don't tell other people what they're supposed to do with their lives. Want to do with their money. You know, right now I'm allied with Barney Frank, who's the chairman of the banking committee, and he has this silly notion that I've joined him in, and he thinks that you ought to have the right to use the internet any way you want, and I'm all for that. One issue is that personal expense. I happen to disapprove of gambling for myself because I like to keep my money. But some people like to do this internet gambling. Now, I'm in favor of allowing you to decide whether or not you want to gamble. What I'm not in favor of is the federal government telling you that you can't do it, and that they use that to invade and control the internet. That's what we don't want to have. But the nice thing about it is it truly does bring people together. And something happened 100 years ago or so in this country. The founders gave us a pretty good understanding about what freedom was all about. Freedom, it emphasized the individual. Freedom was the individual. It wasn't a collective thing. We don't have freedom and we don't have rights because we belong to a group. We don't have rights because we're Catholics or Protestants or women or men or blacks or whites or any of this. It isn't, you know, sex, gender, whatever. It's because we're individuals, and every single individual has equal rights, and that is the reason that people who have different views, social views, can come together and say, yes, I'll fight for your freedom, you fight for my freedom, I'll leave you alone, you leave me alone, and believe me, that could be a happy society. 100 years ago or so, for some reason, even though the founders understood this, freedom was divided into pieces. One group decided that economic liberty was pretty important, but your liberty to decide what you want to do with your own body, what you want to smoke and drink and whatever you want to do socially, oh, we can't trust you with that. And others would say, yes, we recognize that people should have their right to decide what they want to do with their own bodies and their own lives, but you're not smart enough to know what to do with your own money. So why isn't it just possible that we once again could put this back together again and say freedom means that the individual has a right to their life and a right to their liberty and a right to keep the fruits of their labor. Our liberties have been under systematic attack, and it's been especially bad since 2001. There has been a lot of plans even before that to attack our civil liberties. The Patriot Act was not written after 9/11. The Patriot Act was written before 9/11. 9/11 by some neoconservatives was seen as an opportunity. And they saw this and they jumped on it and they said, this is a chance for us to get the Patriot Act passed and the FISA courts and all these things that have happened, and even immediately afterwards, because they had even been planning that before it. This is the time we're going to go into Iraq. So these kind of events are very dangerous. Once you get this mentality that the people are frightened and we have to have the government take care of ourselves, to take care of us, then the majority too often then are too willing to give up their liberties. But Franklin was right. We should never, never have to give up any liberty for our security.